Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence. And now I welcome in Roshni Nedungadi. She's the Democratic pollster and partner at HIT Strategies. Welcome in, Roshni.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining me. And I know that you're one of the leading Asian American women of color pollsters tracking the AAPI, that's Asian American Pacific Islander electorate. And you can speak to the concerns and attitudes of the AAPI community right now as far as it concerns anti-Asian discrimination. So what have you found recently with the rise in events and violence against the AAPI community?
Yes, my firm HIT Strategies is a firm that's led by young people of color, and we really want to center the voices of the communities that we advocate for. So we partnered with Michigan Asian American Progressives to do a comprehensive survey of Asian Americans and Middle Easterners in Michigan just this last winter. We came out of the field with it in February. And we found that over the last year in Michigan itself, almost 40% of Asian Americans that live in Michigan either have personally experienced racism or know someone who has experienced racism as a result of the coronavirus.
Wow, that is incredible. Particularly the rise nationally seems to be also very significant, where I believe as the report is that there's been a 150% increase in hate crimes and violence against the AAPI community. And the interesting part about that is that we had a 150% increase in violence against the AAPI community, but then hate crimes fell overall 7%. In 2020. So it essentially shows that that difference there in the fact that there is a great disparity and people are targeting the Asian American Pacific Islander community. So what do you think needs to be done to tackle this?
That's a great question. And I think the data plays it out overall nationally as well, too, as you were saying. Almost 30% of Asian Americans nationwide say that they've faced more discrimination over the last year. And I think the Senate actually took a very good first step yesterday in passing the anti-Asian hate crimes bill. But there's certainly more to be done. If you look at the people who are experiencing these hate crimes and rise in incidents of hate over the last year itself, women are experiencing at higher levels, but also the younger generation is experiencing these incidents of hate at much higher levels, partly because we're online all the time, where such hate speech is totally unregulated. Like, as an Asian woman myself, I almost encounter racist commentary online every day. So I think more needs to be done in that arena to combat hate speech online.
And what do you think could be done to make this change? As you mentioned, the Senate had recently passed the bill, which is great in terms of first steps, but what do you foresee as the next step?
Well, hopefully it passes in the House as well and then is signed into law. But as far as the next step, it would be great to see some legislation on online hate speech, which would benefit, again, not only the Asian community, but all people of color and women online as well.
Okay, and that could make some significant changes in terms of getting people more involved so that they can curb this hate. And as I understand it, it's a direct product largely of a lot of the propaganda that started with the coronavirus and the pandemic. So I guess what kind of grassroots efforts are you involved in at HIT Strategies?
That's a great question. And we like to get involved with communities on the ground who are doing the hard work, making sure that they are reaching out to voters about elections that are coming up and the importance of the upcoming elections. Michigan Asian American Progressives, for example, in Michigan is very concerned about the 2022 elections. If we look back at 2020, Asian American vote in Michigan increased by 93%. 30% over 2016. And that's because these voters were experiencing, as we've talked about, this really existential threat between, their lives being threatened by coronavirus, but also the racism and discrimination that they had experienced because of it. So they turned out in vast numbers in 2020 to combat this gross mishandling of coronavirus, but also this racism and discrimination that they had been experiencing. We're very involved this year in joining with groups like Michigan Asian American Progressives to make sure that we keep that momentum going. Make sure that there are organizations on the ground talking to these newly activated voters to make sure that they're showing up in 2022 and 2024 as well.
Yes, and that would be very powerful, as we saw how the rally turnout in Georgia really swung things in the favor of the left. And so to have that hopefully on a national level would be fantastic. So in terms of, in addition to kind of rallying people and getting them together, what else are you doing, particularly as it concerns maybe building up candidates who are representative of the Asian American community?
Yes, it's so important to get more representation in Congress, but it's also going to be so important thinking about 2022. Some of our most important swing districts that we need to retain, the progressives need to make sure that they hold on to in 2022. Have large Asian American populations. So making sure that we're running the right progressive candidates that are speaking to their voters' issues, making sure that they are addressing the coronavirus crisis, making sure that they're addressing healthcare concerns, economic concerns, and of course, racism and discrimination, which is a top 3 to 4 issue among AAPI groups nationwide, no matter what ethnicity, no matter what age, and no matter what gender.
Yes, and are there any particular candidates that you are working with or that you see kind of making a run for it in the next few election cycles?
Not necessarily any particular candidates making a run for it, but I think one that we should have our eyes on is certainly Senator Warnock in Georgia, who won the Senate runoff, by a very small margin in Georgia, due in no small part to people of color, Black voters and Asian voters in Georgia itself. And one of the things that he is advocating for right now is making sure that we're keeping restricting qualified immunity in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So he's really listening to these AAPI voters who are standing against racism and discrimination, not only AAPI voters, but voters across the board who are standing against racism and discrimination and saying, we need to do something about this. So it's going to be crucial to maintain the level of turnout among Asian voters there in the state of Georgia. And Republicans in Georgia are doing everything they can right now to make sure that people of color aren't going to turn out at the same level. So that's a race that we're certainly focusing on, making sure that we maintain the same level of turnout there as we did in 2020.
Yes, and that'd be a very powerful thing. The good thing, hopefully, is to put individuals in elected office who not only earn and win the vote, but maintain it by continuing to listen to their constituents, including those in the AAPI community. So we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you more about what you are involved in. Is there anything specific that you are excited about in 2021?
I am really excited about young voters. HIT Strategies has been tracking young voters over the last year in a bi-monthly poll that we call Future Track. And we've been watching the trends of young voters and how they're reacting to current events and situations on the ground. And since June of last year, when the protests around the murder of George Floyd were happening, young voters have been laser focused on this racism and discrimination piece that we've been talking about. They really, young voters, regardless of their race, regardless of whether they're Gen Z or millennials, really rate racism and discrimination as a key issue to them. And so watching these young voters and what they're doing and how we're activating them, how progressive candidates are activating them is really interesting to me.
Yes, and it will be very interesting moving forward, as I think that a lot of people are invested in change, no matter necessarily what age group they are in, but definitely to see younger demographics get involved and advocate for their rights is a very powerful thing. So can you tell us, where can people find more information about HIT strategies and the incredible work that you all are doing to get more voters out there, young, old, AAPI, and other?
Well, we can be found online at www.hitstrat.com. I'm on Twitter at Roshni Nedangadi, and we're also on Twitter at Hitstrat.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Roshni Nedangadi, Democratic pollster and partner at HIT Strategies. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.